Okay, this is the second part to the First Nations Sustainability Development Standard session. Again, we have our panel here. We have Francis Lapointe, Jennifer from Member 2, Joanna Recollet from Atikamekw-Anishinaabeg, and Deborah and Earl from First Nation Market Housing Fund. They'll continue on with the presentation and we'll let them get going.
Okay, thank you, Joey. So we're going to continue with Chapter 3. Now, maybe I'll just give a brief summary of what's occurred today in case there's new members in the audience. We looked at Chapter 1 and 2, and both Jennifer and Joanna introduced their community. For those who are joining us, they'll do a very minor reintroduction to their community in a few minutes, just maps and stuff so you know where they're from a little bit. In Chapter 1, we looked at assessing and empowering the community and looking at how do you assess your community, what are the things you should be looking for, what are the quote-unquote vehicles to achieving those assessments. So we had the description from Joanna on that. And then in the second chapter, we talked about good governance and planning principles and things like that. And Jennifer gave us some information on that and some experiences basically from her community. So next we're going to do Chapter 3. Chapter 3, excuse me, I'm looking for the title, I forget. Designing for Sustainable Development is Chapter 3. And when we started this project, one of the things that people thought that was going to come out of this was a sort of a new First Nation building code. And what I pointed out to our working group and our team is that the laws of physics, in First Nation communities are essentially the same as in non-First Nation communities. So we need the same number of screws to hold up plywood, and rain is shed by roofing and what have you. All those things are very, very similar. There's nothing really that different. What is different is, of course, the climate, the environment, the soil. Those type of things do differ from area to area. So in this chapter, we're really looking at those aspects. So the first topic, or the first section, community design considerations. Some of the things included in there are incorporating environmental and climatic features in the community design. And what we're really talking about there is instead of sort of your run-of-the-mill bread and butter, up and down streets and left and right streets, that sort of, first you bulldoze all the land and then you build some roads and some sewers and things like that. That tends to be the mainstream model, and it's really an economic model. It's based on if you design your lots of a certain size, you have the shortest runs for electricity, for power lines, gas, etc., if you're able to service it that way. But many, many First Nation communities will have hydro, will have power, may not have a central water treatment plant, so they may not, it may be wells instead, so that sort of factor is not that critical. Sewage treatment is often local at the site itself, so there's septic beds, other things like that, constructed wetlands, what have you. Natural gas is very rare in most First Nation communities, so that's not an issue. So this whole principle of designing communities based on economic factors that don't exist in First Nation communities didn't make a lot of sense. Plus the idea of bulldozing every rock and every tree that you see and filling in every gully, didn't make a lot of sense. So the idea here with when it comes to designing communities is designing communities so that they go around natural features, so that they preserve some of that environment, some of that also wildlife corridors, using those ravines and that to travel from one area to another. So that's one major aspect in Chapter 3. I should mention we have binders here. If after the session you want to come up and look at them, you're more than welcome to and scan through it. There's a lot of illustrations, a lot of examples. When we talked about Chapter 1 earlier, we talked about assessments. There's about 40 or 50 pages of sample assessments, and once you get the document, you'll get those assessments as well. You'll be able to download those in a Word format, so you can tweak the questions, change the questions, put your logos in, etc. Same with the job descriptions. They'll be available in the Word document format, so you can adjust it as you need. The drawings, they won't be available in an AutoCAD format, but certainly in a PDF format. Some sample housing, design and construction drawings. Lots of links, tons and tons of links to various documents, whether it's provincial and federal laws, regulations, codes, standards, etc. Lots of links for you to have access to those documents. Also, in that first topic, community design considerations, we're looking at designing for traditional and cultural features. And many people ask me, well, what does that mean? And I flip it back to you and say, what does it mean to you? So at Tikmashang, you're going to see some photographs in a few minutes of examples of what it meant to them. They had a fire arbor that they used for traditional purposes and ceremonies, and it was an octagonal-shaped building with what we call a belvedere at the top. Very, very Victorian looking. It was what they had built, and we were able to build, 20, 30 years ago. And in the end, frost got to it, essentially. Mother Nature took over, and they were forced to tear it down. And we were working with the community on these standards, and they said, by the way, we need some help on this. Will you do this? And we said, yeah, no problem. We looked at it, we designed it with community, we talked to elders, and we came up with a structure that uses the materials that are at hand. So when it comes to sustainability, when it comes to environmental, when it comes to cultural, to me, it usually means use the materials that are at hand. Use those materials that your forefathers and foremothers would have used, and build from that, essentially. So you'll see an example of that. Next, ensuring those communities are accessible. We know that the Canadian population is aging, and the First Nation community population is aging a little bit more slowly because First Nation people are having, the population is still growing. There's still a bit of a baby boom going on. But no matter what, eventually people will continue to age. Our lifespans extend. We have advances in medical sciences and things like that. So accessibility for our seniors is becoming more and more important. By 2056, it's projected that Canada will have about 1/3 of its population, anywhere from 26 to 32% of its population, will be over 65, and a little less than 1/3 will be under 18, leaving about 1/3 or so of the population having to help the other 2/3, essentially, in some ways. But we have to design for our seniors. We have to design for people with mobility restrictions, and that means making sure that we don't build a seniors housing complex too far into the forest, up a hill, across a creek, whatever. It should be designed such a way that there's access to services, that there's sidewalks in the summer, plowed sidewalks in the winter if you live in the north, access to barrier-free parking, and then we'll get into a few minutes of design of the interior of the spaces and how they have to be accessible. Topic 7 is really about designing the community on the larger C, and then designing the residential lots themselves, and then designing the buildings. So you make the community accessible, so sidewalks and things like that, and then once you get onto the lot, then the lot has to be accessible, so, and then eventually the house. So that leads eventually to better parking spaces, lower slopes, lower ground floors, accessible ground floors, ramps, designing for future ramps, and then eventually designing for potential growth and potential changes in the housing. Next, design considerations, design considerations for residential buildings. Again, trying to move away from that, the past policy or practice, really, of looking through a catalog from a manufacturer from Southern Ontario or out east or out west that happens to sell housing to First Nation communities because they have access to roads. And they'll design a sort of vinyl siding house with 15-year shingles and bare bones sort of minimum stuff, and ship it to you, and it's the same house. We saw this, I think a lot of you can go into a community and say, that's for lack of a better word, that's an INAC house from the 1970s. I recognize it. We have 20 of those models in our community. And then later on, you can see the CMHC models from the 1980s and what have you. You recognize these because it's the same house plan that was spread from community to community to community. And, does it respect that community? Is it reflective of that community? I have a personal opinion. Is it, do people who live there, are they proud of that house? Is it something that's necessarily representative of them and their community and their desires and goals and wishes? Not necessarily. So what does it mean to design for your community? Again, we'll see some examples that Tikmashang has undertaken and that Member 2 will soon undertake. We won't see examples yet because they're not developed. But there are ways to make the house more seem in keeping with your own community. And it's something as simple as we're here in Northern Ontario, so let's use logs. But it doesn't have to be a log house as we know it traditionally, but it could be as you'll see in a few minutes, what we call small diameter timber technology. Lots of ways to use logs that are not your traditional format, log house type model. Not that there's anything wrong with that. That's also a valid model. Can you use a different type of siding? Instead of vinyl siding, can you have the local sawmill saw some lumber for you and just do a simple rough sawn, board on board, or board and batten, or a beveled siding? Lots of opportunities there. It doesn't have to be painted. It could be left natural. It will age gracefully over the years, turn a nice gray patina that protects the wood actually, and then you don't have to come back and paint it all the time and see peeling paint, that kind of thing. When it comes to roofing, what are our winter conditions? Do we have snow and rain? Do we have frost? That kind of thing. Yes, we have all of those elements, and they all require a durable material. So one of the best materials for that, we believe we use a lot in our projects, is a galvalumed metal roofing. Galvalume has aluminum and zinc in it, not just galvanized. Much more durable. It stays sort of a patina, off, shiny sort of material. It has no coating on it. If you go to a metal roof company, and ask them to supply you a roof, they're going to want to give you a coated roof with a paint on it because they make money off that. The product that I just described, that comes straight out of the mill, is raw. All they do is they get to cut it in length. They don't make a lot of money by cutting things in length. But if they coat it first, then they can up that price up. And if you coat steel, paint will come off. It does. It just does. So get it in the raw form. Galvalume metal, siding, roofing, soffits, fascias, etc. Extremely durable. It's not like aluminum. Aluminum is much thinner. It's much more durable, much harder. So we've been using that product a lot on projects. There's a whole series of things like that. We get into materials, the building assemblies. So we talk often about what is the best wall, what is the best roof, what is the best foundation system. And there is no answer for, no generic answer. I can't say everyone should use this product, but rather what is the best product for your community? Are you a community that has road access? Then you might want to look at stay-in-place wall form systems. Depending on the type of soils do you have wet soils or not? Do you have rocky soils? Do you want a basement? Don't you want a basement? If you do have a basement, what about radon? That's becoming very in the mainstream right now. So lots of issues like that. We're not here to tell you what you should use. These guidelines give you just that, guidelines. These are the products. These are the advantages and disadvantages. Do some more research, but at least know ahead of time when that salesperson comes calling, you'll be a little bit more informed, a little bit more knowledgeable, and be able to say, well, I'm not sure that your product is the best for us because I've heard this and I've heard that and that kind of thing. So there's stay-in-place wall form systems. There's, double stud construction was really popular a little while ago. Thicker studs is popular right now. Metal studs was in favor for a while, very lightweight and all that kind of stuff. Is that the right product? Again, I can't answer that. I would look at your community, where you're located, what is your access like, transportation issues, the skills in the community, the skills that you assessed in Chapter 1, let's put them into place now or into use, and do the people in your community have the skills to put that particular product together? Same can be said of technologies like PV panels, windmills, geothermal. It runs a gamut of materials and technologies and equipment out there, and which is better, which is worse, what are the pros and cons. Those are the kind of things that you should be starting to assess. So the idea is to inform you as people who are at the forefront of the design, inform you and allow you to be able to ask more questions and be able to understand your material so you just don't get a sales pitch. That model that comes from, I'm going to say Winnipeg because I used to work for a company out of Winnipeg that used to ship a lot of housing to First Nation communities. That model that comes out of Winnipeg, that's a 2-bedroom or a 3-bedroom with a little bit of a hall and a single bathroom, that kind of thing. Does that work for your community? Are you in an area like you're in Southern Ontario, or are you in New Brunswick or Nova Scotia? Are you in BC? Are you in Yukon? What is your community? What do your community members need? What do they want? So, for example, skidoos, snowshoes, skis, hunting equipment. Does someone hunt, large game animals and need to skin that animal? Is someone an artist? Are they carvers? Do they do soapstone, etc.? All of those functions typically require space to perform that function. Sometimes it's outdoors, sometimes it's a garage, it's a shed, but often those things get brought into the house and that are used in the house. So, if somebody is butchering a moose inside a house, happens all the time, there's going to be a lot of condensation, humidity, and so forth formed. So and if it's something that happens very regularly, if game hunting is very normal for that family, should they have a space that is cooler, that's more attached to the house, that's a vestibule porch, that has a proper floor that can be drained, cleaned, and has proper sink and things like that for sanitation purposes, that kind of thing could be thought out. What about the skidoos? What about the sled dogs? What about, all these things? There's so many factors. And again, we couldn't just say, here's a house that fits everyone, because there's no such thing. Each community has some specifics, has some specialties, has some uniqueness, and we ask each community to design for those needs, essentially. Again, through that assessment in Chapter 1, you're going to assess what those needs are. In Chapter 2, you're going to decide how you're going to manage those needs. And in Chapter 3, you'll start to design for those needs. That's really the progression here. Healthy housing. So it's a term that's bandied around a lot. A lot of issues. We talk about radon, and we know about the consequences of radon now in communities and in individuals, of course, leading eventually to lung cancer. We know about mold. We know about the excess humidity that happens in First Nation housing. Really, we should say the excess humidity that happens in northern housing, because that's really the issue. Northern housing, where we have an extreme of temperatures on the exterior and interior, the extreme between the two, and throw in there larger families, overcrowded housing sometimes, lots of humidity from showers, from cooking. In Southern Ontario, what do? We microwave our food typically, and that's not, when you have to remote communities, we're cooking a lot more, open pots, that kind of thing. So there's a huge amount of humidity formed, and then we have HRVs that are designed for Southern Ontario climates that when they're activated, they bring in fresh, cold air, almost frozen air sometimes. A lot of these HRVs will actually freeze in the inners because it's not designed for that kind of climate. So what do people do? Well, that thing's not working. It's bringing cold air into my house. So pull the plug on it, right? Disconnect the unit. And then you've solved the problem temporarily, but unfortunately you're going to have this excess humidity that over time will eventually contaminate the house. It'll lead to mold issues and things like that. Same with roofing and ventilation of roofing. Same with plumbing. And again, this cold climate leading to frozen pipes. People who might stay in their house for periods in the winter and then move on to another location, so they might turn down the heat or something, and you get a little bit of a power failure or something, you get frozen pipes, may not be found till a few months later. So many things that could happen. We talk about firewood, normal use of firewood. It's good to use fire, obviously firewood as a source of heat in homes to replace fossil fuels and things like that. But too many people are storing that firewood downstairs in a wet condition in their basements, and that's releasing humidity to the space. There are whole sorts of issues like that that have to be dealt with. Understanding those problems and designing so that the house remains healthy, essentially. Designing houses that adapt. So accessibility, we talked about access from the exterior and ramps and things like that, wider doorways, but consider designing your houses for future accessibility. Under the Ontario Building Code today, we must provide blocking in washrooms to allow for grab bars. That's a requirement, basic code requirement in the Ontario Building Code. So that in the future, it recognizes that in the future, someone may have mobility challenges and will have to have grab bars installed both in the showers and around the toilet. But that's all and well and dandy for seniors that just need additional help. But if there's somebody that has a wheelchair or a walker, then these spaces often aren't built large enough. Now, we don't necessarily suggest that every house have to be barrier-free, full, extra large washrooms, things like that. But we talk about barrier-friendlier, friendlier space to get to, so that people can visit, people can transition to mobility, to make their mobility challenges less challenging. So it means slightly larger hallways. Hallways without too many corners in it. They're wasted space anyways. Doorways to bathrooms that instead of being only 2 feet, the bare bone minimum, that they're already 34 or 36 inches. Front doors and a path leading to the bathroom. Kitchens that can easily have a section replaced that could be lowered. Those kind of things are very, very simple. They cost very little at the initial planning stage, a very, very minor cost to plan for that, but they save a lot of money in the long run if that house has to be accessible or made accessible in the future. And we know that roughly 1/3 of housing will have to be accessible in the future, if not more. Adaptability. A house that is adaptable is a house that today is a 3-bedroom house, but we've planned the plumbing, the electrical, the hallway, and if you look at the drawings in the book, you'll see some samples of that. A single-family dwelling that is adaptable so that you can easily add another bedroom to the side of the house, or 2 other bedrooms, or an in-law suite, or a bachelor suite for rental income purposes, or a second story. So what do? You make sure your foundations are strong enough to accept a second story. And the way we achieve that is simply there's a corridor with a hallway at the, closet at the end, and with very simple little changes, the closet gets removed, and the lintel is already there. The structural lintel is already in place. So that's a $200, or not even a $200, so $125 item to put in place as you're building. A couple extra studs, a couple of extra lintels, and then you just clad it and fill it all in. And then as you need in the future, you know that your lintel's there, so you could easily make a hole through there and have a doorway through that space. Excuse me. And at the same time, your water, your sewerage line, those kind of things are roughed in and are ready to pop through the wall, or are they capped, or that kind of thing. And your furnace is sized that either it can be upsized or that it's sized adequately for a larger space. You know, those kind of considerations are really straightforward. So that adaptability, again, costs very little. You won't get, well, you may be able to be the future, but your standard housing supplier, their goal is to build the cheapest house for the most buck, basically, right? Give you the biggest house for the least amount of money, so they make money. You know, if you as a community say to a designer, you know, we want our houses to be adaptable and we want this set of adaptability, then they have to conform. You have to ask, and they'll conform. Next, a pretty heated section, and a very large section, choosing appropriate building materials. So again, what is the right building material, whether it's roofing or foundations and cladding and so forth. We'll show you a few examples of some innovative materials used at Atikameksheng. We veered away from recommending any product. You know, I would have hated to be the guy who recommended asbestos or urea formaldehyde, or, you know, all the gamuts of products that have turned out to be not so healthy anymore. We don't want to recommend the product. We want you as a community to research those products, to ask consultants if you have to ask your designers to research it, to read the literature. We have the internet now, so you can read a lot about any product. And as an architect, I get my best information on a materials product, whether it's a window or floor or stud or whatever. I ask the competitor. I always ask the competitor, what do you think about this product? And boy, they are so ready to tell me all about that product, their competitor's product. They will tell me all of the negatives. And then I'll go back to the other guy and I'll say, what do you think of his product? So that's how you get information. I'm serious. You will see the truth come out, because they will tell you every truth that there is to be told about the other product. They know it very well because they're competing against it. And then you flip it around and ask the opposite question. That's how you get information. So heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems. So again, which is the best heating system? Should we be doing PV panels? I know about 15 years ago, someone asked me about photovoltaic panels in Wawa, which is southern Ontario. Everyone know where Wawa is? Land of the Big Goose? Yeah, that's where I was raised. Somebody asked me there a few years back, they wanted PV panels for a swimming pool, an indoor swimming pool they were planning to build. And I did the number crunching, and there was no way ever it was ever going to work. It's just not efficient, not enough sun through the whole period. And I have some family up in Kapuskasing. I was there last Christmas, and my nephew proudly showed me this huge solar farm up there. I was like, wow, I know this doesn't work, so what is it doing here? Well, there's subsidies, tons of subsidies for solar panels right now. And the government is, the reason they're subsidizing PV panels is because it's a technology that's in its infancy. They used to subsidize geothermal. They do not subsidize geothermal anymore because it's efficient now. It's developed sufficiently that it can handle itself. PV panels are not. That is why if we see farms, if anybody's a proponent here, great, there's a great subsidy that comes with PV panels. But currently, we talk about efficiency of panels, and I'm going to give you a comparison. Electricity, if you have an electric furnace, it's 100% efficient. All of the electricity that goes into the furnace creates heat energy, whether it's to run the motor, whether it's to run a fan to push the air, or whether it's to heat the elements. 100% of the energy makes energy, and it's lost back to the house. A wood stove, depending on the kind of wood stove, like a fireplace, is around 35–40% efficient. Most of the heat goes right up the chimney. Natural gas furnaces, propane furnaces that are high efficiency, they run from sort of 95–98% efficient, so that's really good. Solar panels, the energy that falls on it in the form of sunlight, the best one's around 13% efficient. The ones you buy from Canadian Tire, the cheap ones, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7% efficient. That's all they are. So the efficiency is really low. They're not that useful yet. The subsidy makes them economical, really. That's what happens. So that's a business of earning subsidies. So we looked in here in the document, we looked at drip stoves and drip oil stoves and wood stoves and diesel and solar, geothermal, all of the things that you can imagine. We looked at all of them. We talked about the pros and cons. No one is an expert, so we look at the basic data and we give you the basic data. And then we ask you, if you're going to do this, if you're going to look at something, an alternative form of fuel or an alternative source of heating or cooling, etc., that you really look at all the considerations. As an architect, my primary consideration, the thing that we know works well, is that the wind always blows and the sun always shines. So design a house that is designed according to the environment, that faces south in our northern hemisphere, that has trees as buffers from the wind, that has deciduous trees on the north and west side, that has did I say that right? Deciduous tree, coniferous trees on the north side, deciduous trees on the south side, so that in the winter the leaves fall off and the sun shines in. We have a lot of projects where our clients often tell us, we don't even turn on the heating system in this house because we have so much solar heat gain in the winter. They're on Lake Ontario and they get heat gain in the winter, and they're amazed at how much that energy provides them. In the evening, they turn down the curtains. They have these big heavy curtains and they keep the heat in that way, and then they turn on their heating system. But they also have a stone floor that absorbs the heat. A lot of little things that we can do that cost very little in terms of specialty energy, specialty systems, electronics, all those things that break down. Just that, start with that basic, orient your house to the south. I talked earlier about designing the community and designing it right and looking for features and things like that. We have, again, we're used to sort of a Southern Ontario approach where you have a street and the house must face the street and must be parallel to the street, and the house beside it must be parallel to that. Forget all that. Throw all that out the window. Design your houses, design your streets around the natural features, and make your houses point south. And then when you walk and drive through that community, you're going to feel that there's something special about that community. Right away, you're going to say, what's wrong here? What's out of whack? And right away, your mind's going to say, I bet you they all point south. And that's going to be something really incredible. It's how we used to do things. We always did that. We don't anymore because of the almighty dollar and trying to fit as much as we can on the site. Water management. So whether we're talking about stormwater treatment, making sure that the water that falls on our roofs and on our lots move away from the property, move away from the house, they don't make its way into the basement. And winter we have the snow to contend with, and then sometimes snow and rain together. Then we have our wastewater. Whether it's wastewater from toilets and kitchens, and then we talk about gray water harvesting, and we talk about rainwater harvesting, and what can we do with it, and do we irrigate our lawns and wash our cars and that kind of thing, and what are the consequences of that, and what are the potential risks of that, and then our domestic water, where do we get our drinking water, how do we protect that domestic water, and we really look at the large picture, so protecting our watershed, and then eventually protecting the water on your lot from contamination from your own wastewater or stormwater. And of course, throughout all of that, conservation, always very important. So whether we're talking about energy conservation and having programs to conserve energy within a house, so whether we're talking about home occupants understanding that you don't open a window if you're hot, if you have an air conditioning system, think about the two. Open the window, turn on the air conditioning system if that's the case. But the reverse side, when you're cold, is that right? Yeah, we're cold or hot, just watch the window. Open and close the window appropriately. And we don't want to make houses that don't have windows that don't operate. That was 80s mentality. That was always really bad. We want to give the occupants the ability to control their environment, but we need to make sure that they're educated in the process. Opening a window or closing a window comes with consequences to mechanical systems, so how do we address those? Same with, brushing your teeth and keeping the water running, or low-flow toilets that don't work very well, so what's the procedures there? All of the aspects when it comes to water harvesting, protecting, energy conservation, and water conservation as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to first Joanna, and she'll describe some projects in her community. I don't know, you may not have noticed this, but this is part of the fire arbor, and I just came across this image a couple days ago, I guess, as I was putting this together. if you see that image on the left-hand side, you barely make out the sort of ring. And a little side story, we were designing this space, this fire arbor. It's where the smoke is drawn out from the space. And one of my staff member, an Indian from India, really great little guy, he started to draw this thing, and he drew a wagon wheel. I said, "What are you doing? That's a symbol of oppression out west. You know, it's the white man came and all that kind of stuff, so it's terrible." So let's inspire ourselves from other images. And eventually we looked at Norval Morisseau, an Aboriginal artist, and the turtle back, and the way he drew the line on that turtle back. And today, or a few days ago, I noticed that it's also very reminiscent of a dream catcher. So we're very happy that we were able to get rid of that bad symbol and replace it with a very good symbol. And really interestingly, at noon in the middle of summer, the light that comes through that is reflected onto one of the walls just above a window, and it's in the form of a turtle back. It's very oval as opposed to being very circular, so it worked out to be a very inspirational sort of symbol. So with that, I turn over to Joanne. Joanna, sorry.
Thanks. So just with the topic of Chapter 3, Community Design Considerations, so Tigmixing has a significant land base. A lot of it consists of rock and swampy terrain. So right now our settled area is concentrated in a small portion of the land base. So this area, they determined in the capital planning study, was developed to capacity, and we didn't have room for new lots, new residential lots, and we had nowhere to build. So in the capital planning study, they recommended a location for a residential subdivision, which was located a little bit of a distance away from the settled area. So some of the challenges that they had to face when constructing the subdivision was that it was going to cost more because because of the distance. I believe it's about 2 or 3 more kilometers away. Also, they had to consider the serviceability of it. So before they constructed the subdivision, they had just installed the water connection to the city of Sudbury. So now they had to extend that water main up the hill to the new subdivision. And one of the other issues they had to deal with was getting telephone servicing up, telephone lines up to the site. We still don't have that. So some of the options we had to consider were installing, well, right now the community is serviced with fiber optics, the settled area. So right now we're looking at the option of extending those fiber optics to the new subdivision, but that's a cost, and we still have to find funding for that. One of the other issues they had to deal with in the construction of their subdivision was the booster station. Initially, our pump wasn't properly sized, and we weren't getting proper pressures up the hill to the new subdivision. So we recently had that remedied, and so right now the new homes up the hill should have the required fire flows they're going to need, if they need that. And then because we don't have the telephone servicing available for the lots up at the new subdivision, we haven't been able to implement our 911 numbering system. So that's another issue we're dealing with. But it's just, it's things we have to deal with, and we really didn't have anywhere else to develop, so we have to adapt to that. Also, the size of our lots, because we're on individual septic tank and field bed systems, we had to make sure those lots are sized appropriately to accommodate the nitrate dilution, the required nitrate dilution. What else is there? And right now we are completing the construction of 7 units in the new subdivision. We didn't use traditional construction methods. We partnered. Well, we hired a Corcan to complete our duplex unit and a single-family home. So right now we have the single-family home completed, and the family's living in it right now. Our duplex is still not completed. They're a little behind schedule on that. Well, okay, so we had, so the units are constructed off-site, and then they're delivered to the community when they're close to completion and assembled on the lot. So the duplex, I'm not sure what the holdup was, but while they were waiting for to complete the construction of it, we got water inside the building, and we had some mold grow onto the walls, and then that needed to be replaced, which wasn't done right away. So I think, I'm not sure, they're located, the company is located a distance away in the southern Ontario, so I think they were having difficulties getting the labor up to address the assembly of the units. So it's been a year over our originally agreed completion date, and we're hoping to have them completed by March. But yeah, that's just something to consider of who you hire to put your homes together, and just making sure they're going to be able to get it done on time. So we've had members assigned to the units and who've been stuck waiting all this time without a home. We completed the fourplex as part of the 7-unit project. Those are the 1-bedroom units, and those were, I guess, completed relatively on time. However, at the same time, we had the same contractors completing our library renovation. So both projects were a little delayed because of that. I don't think they had enough manpower to take care of both of the projects, the fourplex and our library renovation at the same time. So that's something to consider as well when you're proceeding with hiring your contractors. This is the fourplex right here. And in Francis had mentioned the adaptability when you're designing homes, make sure they're adaptable. With that, our communities is planning to build a foster home, so that would be a 5-bedroom home, and we'd have a tenant, and we wanted to make sure the design of that was we'd be able to convert it into a 2-unit building if we needed to, if we lost our tenants to use it as a foster home, or we couldn't find a family that was large enough to fill a 5-bedroom home. So those were some of the design considerations we asked to be included in that planning. Oh, can you just go to the microphone so we could hear your question?
Is that company still working for you?
Which,
know them. Corrections Canada. Oh, these ones.
oh, they completed the project. Oh, the one that they're still working at. They're still working on completing that project. Yeah, they have to finish the project. Where was it?
Just to clarify, this was one construction company doing this project and the library renovation, and then Corcan approached the community, Corcan's Corrections Canada, to have individuals incarcerated who would learn a trade and build these houses. So it's a bit innovative for them. They're learning through this as well. And so they're the ones who delivered the houses. So the red one that I showed here, everything went well, except that the roof is on backwards. You may not notice that, but it's an eccentric roof and it's supposed to be the other way. Other than that, it's fine. Yeah, little things. This is the foundations for the 2-story, the illustration I showed originally. And, sorry, I'm supposed to have the microphone on. And what happened here was the houses were delivered. They were too large to be delivered with a roof on it. So they had a sheathing on it and some plastic basically and stuff like that. And there was a large storm, and unfortunately that stuff didn't hold up, and water got in. So there was this brand new house, 2-story duplex, so it's 2 semi-detached dwellings, and it was wet. And I walked in there and I told the guys they had to rip it right down to the bones essentially to start over because there would be mold everywhere. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so also under Chapter 3, the discussion on heating, ventilation, air conditioning systems. Whatever system gets put in, I think it's really important that the tenants or the homeowners are aware of the maintenance of that. So right now, our First Nation is looking at making it mandatory, a mandatory session where they learn how to properly maintain their home. I think at this point it's voluntary, and it's not. It could be a better learning session for them. Also, water management. That's a big concern as well. Each of the units in Attigmixing have metering. However, we haven't set up water fees or water charges, but it's something we are going to be considering. However, that probably won't go over very well, so there's discussions of maybe incentives. We would figure out what the average uses are and maybe monitor how much water each family is saving, and if they go over that average usage, then maybe charge them for that. Those are just some of the discussions we're having at this point. Also, the other important thing to consider is our fire flows, available fire flows in the community, and I think that would be, for any community, the limiting to the size of your buildings, because based on the square footage of your building, you require a certain fire flow. So knowing what your fire flow is would limit the size of your buildings in the community. I think that's also important. And just, yeah, as you're expanding your communities, to consider the fire storage, make sure you have that water storage available. So those are just some of the things, some examples from Attigmixing. Is my missing anything?
Features of the fourplex.
No. Do you want to talk about?
Okay,
Jason?
I'll describe the features of the fourplex because they are they're sort of pushing some of the envelopes when it comes to sustainable materials. So if you notice, the exterior, both the foundations and exterior are built with a Dursol stay-in-place wall form system. And Dursol is waste wood chips, for lack of better words, sort of just boiled to remove the sugars from the wood. So you're left with the fiber mixed with a cement slurry and then formed into blocks. So that was one of the images we saw earlier. Oops, the other way. Durisol, D-U-R-I-S-O-L. And there's the foundations there. So there's the block. And they stack. You're familiar with an ICF version of this, a styrofoam version of this. And there's pros and cons. We've described them in the document with the ICF version versus the Durisol version. So it's essentially, it's fairly heavy, more like a concrete block than it is like a ICF form. Mineral wool insulation is added to give it some additional insulation value. But it doesn't have a thermal bridge, doesn't conduct heat. It's mold, fire resistant, soundproof, all those kind of things. Very, very durable, can be left exposed if you wanted. You can leave it like that in the basement. You don't have to cover it with a drywall or anything like that. And if it gets wet, it will dry on its own because it's essentially becomes cement, essentially, a porous cement. And so that's the foundation system. Sorry, the wall system that was used. The foundation system is called a Legolet floor system, and it's a bit like the ICF forms, is that it's a styrofoam form that has a grade beam that's all preformed, and you lay these systems down, and then your standard rebar in that, and then small heating tubes that are air tubes instead of water tubes. So the heating system, you can just see some of the mechanical plumbing here, and I think if I had another shot, just behind some of these pipes behind here, you just see this square plywood box, so that's just the cover the furnace essentially sits on top of that and pumps warm air into these tubes and heats the floor slab, essentially. So there's no ductwork in the space or anything like that. You've got in this case, the thermal mass of the walls that keep the heat in, essentially, and in the summer keeps cool. You'll notice that underneath the window, there's a stud wall construction. That's deliberate because the company that was providing this and a bunch of companies are involved with monitoring the air and water and moisture quantity in this. So it's a bit of a research project in that they're going to monitor the levels and show over time that there's very, very little humidity develops in the space. And then the rest of the house, pretty traditional in terms of roof, but it is a galvalumed roof, so there you have it there. Just looks like a dull gray in this case, but sometimes shiny depending on how the sun hits it. A bit of cedar shingles, a bit of wood siding. That's a pre-finished wood siding that has a 50-year warranty if you refinish it after 15 years with a solid finish. A little bit disappointed in the columns. This is where I thought that, we have a couple columns in the background there, so let's get the chainsaw out, guys. But it was too complicated, so they couldn't be bothered. But it has a lot of great features like that. Some vinyl windows because they're very low maintenance. And then the ceiling, as you saw in this last shot, it's an OSB ceiling and then sealed. The joints are sealed. It does act as a vapor barrier. And then a mineral wool insulation in the ceiling as well. So very little potential for off-gassing, very little potential for mold and mildew formation because there's very little sort of wood for the mold and mildew to eat. So that's sort of the long and short of the green features here. And by the way, each unit has its own heating system, its own HRV, its own electrical meter, water meter, et cetera. It's all distinct. And because these are rental units, as you can see, there's these two solid doors here. They lead to the utility rooms of each of these units. So there's 2 there and 2 there. So 4 units. They're a little bit more there than bachelors. They're sort of 1-bedroom units, small 1-bedrooms, with their own mechanical systems that housing staff can get to manage and maintain. Yep. I have no idea. Yeah. Yes, it would be. I should point out I wasn't the architect of this particular design. We had designed a 2-story fourplex in a really complicated site that was essentially a sample. When we started with the community, they said to us, of the 23 lots they had, pick the worst lots and let's do our rental housing there so that we have the best lots left over for market housing, essentially, for the rest of the residents. So in other words, their budget was going to absorb the complexity of the more complicated lots. So lot 25, the one with the 2-story semi-detached, is up on a hill. So the house sits on that hill, and there's driveways up there, and there's very limited spaces for the not constructed wetlands for the septic fields. This one here was a bit of a gully, actually, and it was filled and engineered fill because the Legolet slab could take that with all the reinforcement in it. The costs, we went. Another design firm was hired. The construction company had their own designers, and they pushed for this model because they felt that that's how they worked best with Durasol, a 1-story structure. The plan was very similar. I'm disappointed in that this model doesn't really take advantage of south exposure. On the back side, there are large windows, and it's the north side. So that was, I think, one of the failings that they weren't able to solve well. But otherwise, material-wise, it's a good example of good solutions. And this was going to be cheaper than the stacked 4-story, the stacked 4-unit building. That was why they went this route. So it doesn't have a foundation. The other one would have had a pile foundation. So it was more economical in this as compared to the second evil, if you wish, which was the building in the swamp, sort of. And then just to finish off, the small diameter timber technology. Bending logs, yes, these are red pine trees, 6 to 8 inches in diameter, being bent mechanically, fastened together, bolted together, erected into this shape, and all bolted or stainless steel strapped, and then eventually clad in a 1x6 and then some sheathing and a cedar shingle. So this building is used for ceremonial purposes, for healing purposes, for community events, that kind of thing. Powwows, etc. Okay, any more questions? Okay, I'll go with this gentleman. For which, for the Durasol system, or? Yeah. So the fourplex, it doesn't have a crawl space, so all that's in the slab, cast in the slab itself, are the air ducts. But everything else, there is nothing else. There's a,
Where you said that was all enclosed in.
sorry?
The flooring where you said that was all enclosed in, how do you access wiring and
So,
piping as such like that?
yeah, so any piping that's either cast in the slab. So the two models that we employed here at Tigmashing was either a crawl space situation, so that was one of the first photographs you saw, where the Durasol system was there. And in the semi-detached, there are some mechanical systems in the crawl space, accessible only from the exterior door, accessible to service people, not to the tenants. So there's a hatch in the floor that allows them to have access. All there is down there, though, is ductwork and a bit of plumbing for drains, that kind of thing. And in the fourplex, again, plumbing cast into the slab for the most part, and there is no ductwork. There's a bit of HRV ductwork related to that, and there are flexible ducts that are in the attic, insulated, that'll feed back to washrooms, kitchen areas, that kind of thing. And then the HRV is in the mechanical room. So everything, you open that door and everything's right there, whether it's power, electrical panel, HRV, furnace, natural gas, et cetera, they're all there in that one room. And sorry, sir?
Yeah, no, when you were talking about the solar panel, you left us with an impression of 13% efficiency. I assume that that is based on calorific value, so you get so much heat out of gas, you get so much heat out of wood, etc. But if you have gas heating, you pay for your gas. If you have electrical heating, you pay for your electricity. If you have wood heating, you may or may not pay for your wood, but you certainly don't pay for the sun. It's there, so that's 13% efficiency in the overall implementation in heating or electrifying your house. What does that mean?
Good point. So when manufacturers of solar PV panels are trying to make their panels more efficient, that's the first thing, right? They're trying to reach a higher efficiency so that when the sun falls on it, and now when the sun falls on it and it's a cloudless day and the panels are clean and they're oriented in the right direction. So a lot of little negatives there. But when all of that works, you're at 13% efficient. So that means that the heat energy, you're right, the heat energy, the solar energy that hits the panel is converted to electrical energy, essentially. So no, it's not, it's, yeah. Yeah, so the issue is when you take into account that night happens half the time and the panel will be dirty and it won't be oriented in the right location, I can't give you the exact conversion of what that means, but what it means essentially is that, well, let me put it to you this way. If PV panels were that efficient, everyone would have them because it's free energy, and why not? Right? So that's what it comes down to. Somebody else will have to do the math to tell us why it isn't the case. Why is it that we did some lead projects where we had everything was a standard offered contract at the time, where the one project in particular, well, we calculated how many PV panels it would take to service this building, and it was 3 acres of PV panels to service the building. Didn't make any sense. We were able to negotiate a return on investment of, I think it was 82 cents per kilowatt hour, when electricity costs the client about 7 cents per kilowatt hour. So they're making money that way. The money's rolling in as long as the sun is shining. They don't even have to operate the building. And where's that subsidy come from? It came from the utility company, and where they're getting their money from? Us. So, and that's Southern Ontario. Yep.
I was confused by your comment about HRVs when you said they're just bringing in cold air. That's what HRVs do. So I wasn't sure what you
Yeah.
were leading as a comment
No.
about that. Because we do have to, it gets
Yeah.
preheated by the house air exiting.
Yeah.
And inline heaters are a way to reduce that temperature difference and to help boost it. But I got left with the impression that you're saying HRVs were not a good idea. And then
No.
you was commenting that the
No.
mechanic rooms had HRVs. So I just want to
Yep.
make sure that we're clear about
Okay.
HRVs are a good.
Okay. So HRVs designed for your environment are a good product. So that was the clincher. In the past,
Sizing and balancing.
exactly. So in the
Products are the same. It's sizing
Well,
and
there's-
balancing that are more important than inline heaters can be added for more northern climates.
Yes, and then depending on where you are, Southern Ontario, ERVs are apparently working better than HRVs, so there's that discussion now. No, I don't mean to leave with the impression that HRVs are not a good thing. They are a good thing. Just sizing them and designing for your climate, that's really the concern. too often they get disconnected because they're bringing in cold air. So,
Cycle is the key,
yeah.
that they all bring fresh air and that's.
yes, that's their whole goal is to exhaust the stale, warm air and preheat the cold incoming air, and hopefully,
That's the most important part of them, that's
Yeah.
absolutely essential. to
yeah,
have.
yeah, yeah.
That's-
Yeah, HRVs, well designed, are a good thing, yes. In the fourplex, the designer there pushed not to have HRVs and said they weren't necessary because of the construction of the building. And I spoke to the client and pointed out the pros and cons, and they insisted on HRVs. So, yeah. Now, I do have to move on to chapter 4. We're total opposite of earlier, now we're half an hour late. Because I talk too much. Okay. I'm going to turn this over to Jennifer very quickly. Basically, you've been studying these topics, these sections, defining and understanding cost-effective housing. Really what we're talking here about is, as a community, find out what makes your housing more expensive. Is it transportation? Is it an issue of skills and the availability of skills? Is it a lack of resources, a lack of materials, et cetera? We often hear from communities, oh, you've got these great ideas, but how are we going to pay for them? So this is the beginning of understanding where are the costs coming from when it comes to housing. So I won't delve too much more than that. The rest of chapter 4 is really, it's sort of the climax of the work, essentially, in that we talk about new standards for accessibility, for sustainability, for durability, et cetera. What are those standards? So essentially we go through a list of standards and describe them a little bit. So whether we're talking about model national energy codes, LEED, R2000, that kind of thing. We're talking about accessibility standards, whether it's the American ADA or the CSA standards or local community standards, provincial standards versus federal standards, et cetera, and we eventually get into construction contracts and recommending that you have a good construction contract. You don't have to reinvent the construction contract. There are plenty of them out there now, and there are some that are designed more neutrally, if you wish, designed for the construction industry. Talk about CCDC2 type contracts or CCDC type contracts. And then just having proper construction review. In Chapter 2, we talk about making sure that you have building inspectors that are qualified and there's a process in place for them to inspect and provide inspection reports, et cetera, et cetera. In Chapter 4, we're talking about really what should that inspection report include, what equipment should the inspectors have, when should they inspect, at what stages of construction, et cetera. And then finally, warranties and maintenance procedures. Again, what are the warranties? They're worth the paper they're written on, et cetera, et cetera. What do you do? How do you seek out remedies when it comes to applying a warranty? Just the fact that you should always actually go into a project either the 9th or 10th month after occupancy as part of the warranty process and review the construction with the contractor, identify flaws, warranty items, et cetera, and have the contractor repair those at no cost. That is part of their standard contracts when it comes to warranties. And then finally, maintenance procedures. What are the maintenance procedures for your housing and any other structures? What schedule do you have? Do you allocate finances, capital dollars, et cetera, to maintain those projects, making sure that you are able to do that? So with that, I'll turn it over to Jennifer again. So.
All right, thanks. Again, Jennifer from Member 2. We're a First Nation Mi'kmaq community located in Nova Scotia, right in the city of Sydney. Okay, some of the things we're going to talk about with Chapter 4, I guess, the residential construction standards document that we developed. I just want to go back to that and talk a little more about it. We engaged our First Nation contractors when we were developing that standard, and it's basically the National Building Code plus Energuide 80. I mean, we always try to strive for more energy efficiency, but our minimum standards are the National Building Code and Energuide 80. What else? Well, when we build houses, back in the day, we used to hire people on staff and pay them hourly to construct the houses we built in our community. But several years ago, we moved to a contract basis for building houses. So we put out a proposal and invite bids from our contractors on all of these houses, like the different aspects, like the building of the house, the foundation, the electrical, the plumbing, like the plumbing and heating. And we found that more cost efficient for the First Nation. So that's one of the improvements I think we've made to the construction of our houses. When it comes to new materials, we have our housing staff research them, as Francis suggested. And we may or may not use these materials that people are recommending to us. Getting back to the contract system for building houses, the successful bidder does sign a contract with Member 2 to say that, to outline what they're responsible for, what we're responsible for. And in that contract is a 1-year warranty that we expect the contractor to honor. I can't speak to that part of it myself, but if you want to know our experience, just email me and I could point you in the right direction for that. We have an occupational health and safety coordinator, and they coordinate all of the work sites with respect to health and safety and the Nova Scotia Workers' Compensation Board requirements, insurance requirements. We have two safety officers, and we're in the process of hiring another one right now. So we're going to have a few safety officers on staff. The process to build a house. We don't have a building permit process yet. It's something that we've talked about at some of our meetings, but we just haven't, I guess, embarked on that adventure yet. But we know it's included in the standards, and we're going to look to see how other communities implement it before we give it a shot ourselves, I think. So right now, the process in Member 2 is a band member will write a letter to Chief and Council requesting a service lot, and Member 2 will provide them a one-time grant and a guarantee for their mortgage. The housing department will review the house plans with the potential homeowner and, I guess, approve them or not approve them based on our housing construction standards. There are inspections done on progress and building code compliance, and we have a person on staff who performs that duty. The payments to subcontractors in our construction of our houses, the director of housing, or who is also the inspector, one of our qualified inspectors, they will I guess authorize the payment, but all of our payments go through our finance department. So it's not a disconnect, but that's just how our process works. All of our financial transactions take place in the finance department. I talked about the warranties and maintenance procedures. We have a preventative maintenance program in Member 2. It's not as big as I'd like to see it, but I mean, it's a start, and it's something we're going to improve on. And one of the things, I'm going to talk about another project we're working on. It's a tangible capital asset register, and a major part of that is the housing assets that the community has. So what we're doing is assessing, with the help of the fund, of course, assessing the condition of some of our older housing stock. We're going to do an interior and exterior structural, mechanical, electrical assessment of the house and do some life cycle planning so that we know what has to be replaced next year, in 5 years, in 10 years, and we can start planning for that. So that's I think it's related to maintenance, so I kind of brought it up. And I don't have a whole lot more to talk about on chapter 4.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Any questions from the floor, either on any of these two chapters or the two previous chapters? We have about 20 minutes. We have a bit of closing remarks, and Earl's going to speak for a few minutes after. Any questions? Nope. Okay. So I'm going to turn it over to Earl now.
I wanted to thank our two guests who came in from Member 2, Jennifer Martin, as well as Joanna Recollet from Atikameksheng. I know this is something that we had done last year at the last year's housing, and I think it's important not just to get the consultant who worked with the First Nations to develop the standard, but hear from the First Nations directly themselves in terms of how they're implementing the standard. Certainly as we progress, as Deborah mentioned earlier, in terms of how we're growing, certainly we're starting to reach out to a lot more First Nations with the fund in terms of the amount of dollars that are being projected for our use. Recognizing, of course, this is looking forward, and what we're hoping First Nations will do is really take advantage of that. Atikameksheng has actually taken advantage of our credit enhancement through some renovation programs, as well as some new construction. You see here a family that have used the fund to sort of fix up their house. This other family here, they added some landscaping as well as an outdoor swimming pool. I think I've shown this to a number of people before, as well as a utility storage shed. Upgraded their bathroom, redid their kitchen, and likewise at Member 2, they are working with Peace Hills Trust, and they're very proud of their relationship with Peace Hills Trust. They've done a number of rental units there in Member 2, and so you can see from their initiative that they're also taking advantage of our credit enhancement with the fund. So it's not just about the capacity development, although they're doing quite well with us in that area. Another Member 2 initiative that I understand this is a single mother and 2 children. They've one child, and they've just acquired this house, and so it's working for their members there as well. What happens when a First Nation is approved? They sign a 3-year letter of agreement with us for capacity development. There are a number of different areas that we use our capacity development for, and I've shared this list with you in the past. Certainly a number of things that were referenced in this presentation: the land use planning, the zoning bylaw, the engineering studies, the capital planning studies, the housing policy reviews. These are all sort of part and parcel of how we try to assist First Nations to help implement and improve their housing and governance program. And so in that regard, we have done an awful lot to assist First Nations in moving forward. Overall, the whole idea that we've been asked by a lot of First Nations is helping them shift the minds of their band members to doing things differently, rather than the expectation that the band will do things for the community. So this is where we're being asked by a lot of First Nations to help shift the minds of ordinary band members in terms of saying we have to do things differently as a community. Again, our fund, we don't charge for what we do. Certainly it's the First Nation that determines their priorities for both the credit enhancement and the capacity development. I'm leaving you with the contact information of all of our participants here today. And certainly, again, you're welcome to come after this session to talk individually to Atikameksheng and Member 2, the 2 ladies that are here. As well, I'll be at the booth all day tomorrow. You can come and talk to me directly. And certainly, I wanted to end this presentation by saying the standards will be available the first part of March at our website and at Atikamek Sheng's website. And for any First Nation that is working with us, they will get a free hard copy of the standards. So that's what I wanted to share with you guys today. Thank you, Miigwech. How do you say that last word, Jennifer?
Walaliok.
Walaliok, which means we're thanking everybody. Thank you all.
You can pull it.
Yeah.
Okay, there's two things I want to do here right now is, we're going to end up thanking our presenters here, but we also got a prize to give away. But first things first, I'd like to thank all the people on the panel here for the presentation. We do have gifts for all the presenters. I need an extra handle. If we had a stand, I could do it, but so Francis, if I'd like to thank you with this gift here and for your time and coming to present. Jennifer, thank you very much. Joanna, oh, careful there. Don't want to fall down here. Thank you. Deborah, I get it right? Yeah, that's what I said, be careful. Thanks again for coming. And Earl. Thanks for coming out. Yeah, once again, if we can get a round of applause for presenters. And I believe, like they were saying, they'd be available for questions one-on-one, or if you'd like to discuss that with them. I am going to ask them to help me, well, give me some numbers so I can decide on who gets this gift. So what I'm going to do is, there's 5 rows. Francis, pick a number, 1 to 5, 4. 3, we'll go 3 over. Well, there's only 2 in, so it'll be number 2. And I was just thinking I'll go the rows back and this way to this way. You said 3? And I was going to ask Joanna for a number around the people. But looks like fourth row back, second row table over is the winner. So, from my viewpoint, it's Felix. So if you can come up, we'll give you your prize. And so once again, thanks to everyone for coming out. That's the end of our presentation, and hopefully everyone has a great night. And we'll see you tomorrow at the trade show, which starts at 9. And the Builders Challenge is throughout the day. If you're not signed up and you'd like to, come on out. And everyone have a great night. Thank you. Bye.